So we're going to switch over to my machine now. And I've got the project in a different state. We've scaffolded out a few things in here to get some bits working. But what I wanted to show is the way they had the code set up. Essentially, we're using all of the web components themselves just like on their own inside of TypeScript. But you can call the graph yourselves. And so the easiest way to do that is just to kind of go in here and, go in and add a new graph control, and I'm just going to have my notes up just in case. And essentially, we're going to go and import those providers. Now, these providers are there as soon as you instantiate the Graph Toolkit, right, Nicola?
That's right. Yeah. So you can use these anywhere in your project.
Right. So I'm just pulling those in. And then the benefit of these providers, Nicola, what can I do with these? Like, what's it saving me as a developer?
So when we write a lot of the code for the authentication, so managing all the access tokens and fetching access tokens and authenticating the user, that's all done through these providers. And you're using right now we're using the MSL provider, but the code you're writing actually doesn't really care what kind of provider you're using. Right now you're just getting the client, the SDK client for the graph to be able to kind of call the graph. And we have providers for on the web, which is the MSL one. But we also have a provider for Teams, which we'll show later. We also have a provider for SharePoint. So if you're building a web part, you can use the SharePoint provider to get the token for the authentication. We also have a simple provider, which if you already have your own authentication, you can just give us a function that does the access token. And the toolkit will kind of pick that up and can be able to use that. And we also have a proxy provider, which allows you to proxy all of the calls to your backend. So if you do backend authentication, like on the behalf of Flow, you can use the proxy provider to kind of pass that authentication through your backend.
Yeah. And so now we've built that. We have this event view that I stubbed all out. And so we're basically returning in here the event. So in this instance, we're getting specific information, which is a bit more of a complex query. And if I just jump into that method there, we see this giant to do. And so as a developer, what I'm going to show is like how you go about finding this. And we did this near in the intro when someone was asking about channel messages. But for instance, if I wanted to go work out how to get a particular event from the graph with an ID, if I jump over into me logged in as my demo tenant here, I'm in graph.microsoft.com, which will resolve to developer.microsoft.com/graph. And I can just go over to the docs. And, this is the way I do it. There are many different ways of doing it. You can go in through Google and find it. You can go in through the search at the top here. I like the table of contents one because I can type get event and it will show me all the different things. So I know I want the event off the calendar, but you can get it off the group calendar as well, because this is on someone's personal calendar. And if I scroll down, it kind of talks about the various different time zone capabilities of the API. And the most important thing is like, what does it look like as just a simple REST query? And then the second thing I always look for, which I always see in Stack Overflow questions, is like, what permissions do I need to run this? And this goes back to when I was in the portal azure.com, all the permissions that Moderator had to be able to call this to get a person's calendar. We're going to lead that calendars.read capability. Now, the nice thing about these docs is if I click on the examples on the right-hand side, what you'll actually see is that it's showing me a specific example with a stubbed out Thake event ID. And if I click try it here, that's going to launch on the right hand side that try it experience. And if we look over here, you should see that we can run this, but I'm signing here and that's going to run as a query. It's going to fail because the sample that you get is not a real event ID. Now I've just remembered that we should be pulling in Darrel right about snows as our special guest.
Did you forget about Darrel? How dare you?
I did. And he didn't say anything. He's so nice. So we'll just add him to the call, and we'll just make sure we bring him in with OBS. Sorry, Darrel. Hang on. We don't want to see my gawky face. And we'll just plug Darrel in. There we go. Darrel, where are you? He's probably completely forgotten to have his Skype turned on.
I see him having a lot of fun answering questions, though.
Well, when he joins, he'll show up. We'll just shame him. notoriously until that point. It says it's ringing him. Anyway, so once he comes in, he'll pop up gloriously on the right-hand side. And so we need to find an event ID first. And we are working on some ways to like magically, if you are signed in, just, go grab the first event ID that we see. But I'm going to grab that for a minute. And I'm just going to do /events here. Now this gets a bit curly because we're only on half the screen. So you can actually go to the full Graph experience. And, that'll pull a lot of the information through. So if we run that query, these are all the events. Now, there's a lot of events on this person's calendar. And the one we were after was the hand washing one. And so you can see we can just write queries in here directly in line. So I can say the subject, and I'm pretty sure it was hand washing with an exclamation mark. No.
Luckily, I can actually hear you now, Jeremy.
Look at that.
There we go.
Yay.
Hi, Darrel. Do you want to introduce yourself? Well, I go
Good
find out
morning.
what the name of that calendar invite was. Oh, did you change the name of it? You did. I should be looking at Outlook. Oh, we can get to events now in Teams, can't we?
Yes, you can.
Hand washing with a lowercase. I did do that.
I didn't change it.
Oh, I'm not signed in. That's why. No one kind of pointed that out. So one big thing at the minute we have is when you sign into Graph Explorer in the try experience, when you hop over into this experience, it's using different app IDs because we're using different technology to get the graph calls working. And we do have a bug, but it's okay. We're fixing it, but we decided not to push it out for build because we were a little bit scared. There you go. That bug is when I click on open here, we don't have the require URLs in upper and lower case, so it trips us. Anyway, so you can see here that comes back with all the information about the hand washing event that's in my calendar. So there's hand washing exclamation mark. And then what I want to do is just grab that. Now, Darrel, a long time ago in Graph Explorer, we had this magic thing that allowed me just to click and grab that URL. And you're going to see me awkwardly try and use my mouse live here and copy that URL. And I'm going to go and paste that in.
Yeah, we need to do a little bit of Monaco love because now we're using the Monaco editor in Graph Explorer and it has all kinds of capabilities. So
light it up. So you can see here now we have just an event by the event ID and we're getting some information back, but often we want to kind of explore it. So you can see here online meeting provider is Teams because that was what this is. But if I want to, for instance, get back a little bit more information, I can use the select commands. Now I have this already pretty sure here. Yep, because I'm not going to type this out. You can see on the right hand side I can just add to my query once I've got the event ID in there and run that query, and I'll get back a little bit more information. And this is like streamlining what I'm going to return to my web client, which you always want to do. You want to make sure you only bring back what you actually need. And so now I'm getting this online meeting back. And the thing that we really need to use, which I'll show in a moment, is that we're going to need this join URL. This join URL is essentially, if I was in my calendar here, it's this URL that you click to actually launch a Teams meeting. So you can get access to that. And it's what Nicola was using to post into the messages in the group to say,
right,
come back to the main meeting and force him to jump in. And the nice thing about this is that this is actually an ID. This is the unique ID of the Teams meeting that we can do some magic juice with.
It's very handy having the same ID for both the online meeting and the chat. Kind of makes things really easy.
Right, because then we can kind of do some stuff. So in here, like, because I have the get client already pulled in, now I know what I want to go call. I can basically, go use get client, and I can go get the API. Now, I don't know what I really want to put in here. And so what I can actually do is go over to code snippets, and you'll see that it's actually given me, well, the C# code. I wish I was running C#, that's where I'm most comfortable. But I can see here the JavaScript code. How does this magic work, Darrel? This seems like it's crazily clever in the way that it's doing that based on a REST call.
It's really just driven off the metadata that describes the Graph API. If you go to the Graph and go to whack $metadata, you'll get this giant XML document, which is this format called CSDL, or Conceptual Schema Description Document, which is left over back from the Entity Framework days. and it just describes a set of entities and relationships. And from that, we can figure out what the SDK surface area looks like, and therefore how you should go and call the particular API. It makes it fairly easy to generate the SDK code.
So I find it super useful. I mean, for me, especially because I'm jumping between the different languages. Like I do a lot of iOS development. And so not Objective-C though. I'd love it if we did Swift here. But actually the Swift turns out to be very, very similar to the .NET SDK code when it's generated. But just having this here as a helper is super useful. And this works across whatever you do inside of here. Now there are some things we're adding. Like it didn't pull over the select statement here. So you saw me in code. Go add that afterwards. And then one thing which we've added a GitHub issue for is that you notice that when I was trying to pull the ID of the meeting that came through from the UI layer, I had to change these from single quotes to backticks so that this would be able to work in that string. So that's just one little thing. You know, as we're learning and improving this stuff, we're adding those in. And if you've got feedback, we do have a GitHub repo where you can kind of submit those issues for Graph Explorer as well, and we'd really appreciate it. So that's like a very simple call for how you go get the event information back. And then one other thing we wanted to do was essentially go get the channel, the people in the meeting. So if I go back to that didn't work. If I go back out to the breakout view here, you'll see that one thing that we are doing is we're pulling through all of the users in here. And whereabouts in that code is that? Where is it? I forget where it is now. Was it in the breakout view, Nicola, where we're getting all the participants? Who was in the meeting?
We actually get it into. Actually, that's a good question. Maybe it's in the event. No, it's in the breakout view.
It's the breakout view.
You're right. Yeah.
I think you're in the breakout view right now.
I think that's where you're right now.
Let me do it right. I'll do it this way. I'll cheat.
You could do just Control-Shift-F and just search for it.
Yeah.
And so
if you Control B, it'll hide that left-hand bar, and we can see the code that's currently underneath our talking heads.
There you go. Thank you. Yeah, see, that helps. And so effectively here, what we want to do is we want to be able to go based on who's in that meeting. So in the demo, we showed Nicola, Beth, and I in the meeting. We need to know who's in the meeting at that point in time to then be able to split those people out into groups. And so again, if I go back to the docs here, you know, the way I do it again, if I exit this focus mode, is I would come in here and go like chat members, and nothing comes up. Now that you can come in here and search all of it, and you'll see that, you know, it's going to start showing you different things across the environment. But what I found, you know, and this is like a learning thing, I often will start in the beta API, especially with Teams right now because it's so new, and you'll see that chat members comes up. We're trying to get it so that both V1 and beta will show up in here, but we're working with the docs team around that. But when I do,
maybe that's going to be our next live stream where we actually add that feature in
right, and we
docs.
can give it a slow clap. And so this allows me to show all the people that are members of a particular chat, and you can again see that this is the requirements we can have from permissions if I'm doing this within our application. And again, you know, all of our REST APIs follow a simple syntax of, you know, give me a chat ID and tell me the members of it. And in this instance, if I go down to examples, again, we can see the JavaScript example here is just going to, you know, go through there. And because we're using beta, you explicitly have to tell the Graph client to use that switch. So by default, Darrel, it'll always call V1 unless you put that version thing in there.
It will in JavaScript. In C#, there's two different packages because we generate all the strong types. So if you download the beta SDK for .NET, it will automatically call beta, and if you do the V1, it will automatically call V1. But JavaScript's a bit different.
Right. Okay. And then, so the other thing that we have is we have the online meeting URI, because if you remember in Graph Explorer, if I look at the response for this particular event, when we create the event and you mark it, this is an online meeting. If I scroll megally down, it's stored in that packet, but the URI, the meeting URI, is not like the chat ID. And so what we have to do is a little bit of magic to essentially get that chat ID. And so what we have here is a little function that is doing a regex match based on finding that URL where it says meetup-join, and it's going to grab that particular meeting app, the chat ID out. And so that is kind of something that you just have to kind of bear in mind, is that often, and I've done this with a few apps now, it's hard to go find that chat ID, and it's just, you have to remember it's part of that meeting message there. And so if I do get chat ID from online meeting, and I've got that online meeting URI there passed in, and now that'll essentially pass me out the chat ID, and then I just need to make sure I use chat ID in there too. And so that, again, is just navigating a few different calls to get at those things. We've given feedback to the Teams team that it might be nice to actually have in this particular thing the chat ID as a defined thing, because who knows if they're ever going to change this logic, and our regex might break. But that's just something to bear in mind.
Yeah, and definitely call that out if you have an opportunity to talk with product teams. We do in the API review constantly ask the teams to put in navigation properties to graph entities rather than these kind of opaque URLs, because we never want to see people having to do regexes on URLs. It's just
because it breaks. It will break, and the engineers will make a decision on a meetup join URL, and there'll be all these like knock-on effects of like, well, we didn't realize that people have tied a contract to that and picking it out in this weird wonderful regex. So this is how we're doing it for now. There's no other way around this right now, and so we're working with it on that. And then the other aspect of this is in here is I can go create an online meeting too. Now I've got some of this code already because we're trying to get through a lot of stuff here, and you don't want to see me typing away. But in a similar vein, we can go create that online meeting. So this is essentially the function that, based on start time, end time, and the subjects of the meeting, which in the event UX, we're creating a bunch of groups and splitting up the different members. This is essentially just creating those online meetings. Now, Nicola, one thing you fell for, which I see a lot on the stack, was you were looking in the teamwork for how to create a meeting, right? I think you remember this one? No?
What do you mean? Sorry.
Well, so do you remember you were saying, well, it's a Teams meeting, so why isn't it in the teamwork part of the table of navigation?
Oh, that's right. Yes.
And I went to Darrel and I was like, why do we have this? So if I go online meeting here, it's under cloud communication. So we can see that you can create an online meeting, but it's not under Teams. Darrel, we had a good discussion about this. Why is that not inside of Teams? Like, it's a Teams meeting. Why isn't it in the Teams in the docs?
Because you can have online meetings that aren't related to Teams. It is actually an independent concept and is actually used from other products around Microsoft, like Dynamics 365, that has their own calendaring mechanism, and they have the ability to create online meetings. So, I mean, we tie things together where it makes sense, but an online meeting doesn't necessarily have to be correlated directly to a Microsoft team. And please don't use that whack app/online meetings. That's supposed to be updated and gone away. So it's supposed to be whack communications.
Okay, I think there's and then actually there's, there is no, I think there is one here and we haven't got to it. This is bad. Yeah. We need to go to that PM and tell them to go fix those things. There's a lot of open issues for this page. We are trying to get better at that, folks. I know we keep asking you for feedback, and you're like, well, you're not listening on certain pages, but we're building a Power BI dashboard. We're reporting up to management to let them know which workloads. When we talk about workloads, we talk about these. So cloud communications engineering team is actually different to the teamwork team as well, which I thought we were just shipping out org chart by putting them in the table of contents in different places. But as Darrel mentions, and actually I believe the live sharing that they announced the Visual Studio Code is using that cloud communication stuff too, Darrel. I think
under the covers it definitely yes.
Yeah. It might not be actually calling the Graph API to do it, but yeah, true. So that's that. But then there was one last area other than just calling that out as a good learning of where do I find this stuff. And we didn't use app in here, Darrel. In the code we used Me Online Meetings. We took on your code review comments.
Yes. Yes.
The other one, which Nicola, you wrote, was specifically around the extension stuff. Do you want to talk a little bit about that quickly?
Yeah. So, I mean, I was trying to get away from having to have my own database to kind of store the information about all the different groups, right? Because when we generate a breakouts, we generate a team, we generate channels, we know who the people are, but we need to keep that mapping somewhere. So the extensions, the open extensions that the graph supports actually was a perfect way to do that. What we do is on the event that we are in, we actually attach a new open extension, and we just store that information as part of that. So that way anybody can sign in and can view that additional data that's attached to that event now to that extension. So when I go and generate those teams, I store that in a JSON object and I just pass that on as an extension to the graph and just stores it for me.
So if I went into Graph Explorer, this graph extension name, I think you have it at the top here, is just Moderator test. So if I went over to, I'm looking at the wrong browser window, Graph Explorer, I've still got my event loaded up here, right? And so if I just get rid of this for now and just do extensions, oh, and then com.moderator test.
Yeah, I think so. It's hidden behind the view, so people can't see it as much.
Oh, okay.
Behind the cameras, yeah.
I could hide all your pretty faces, but then, where's the fun in that? Okay, so, this event doesn't have an extension? Is that what this is saying?
It was not found in the store. Let me see. Extensions, com, moderator test. Yeah, it should be there. Maybe it's because I created it and not you.
Oh, there we go. Typo. So you can see here that we have this. This is the extension name.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
There's the ID, and then basically that's the context of what it's using against that particular event with that event ID for that particular user. And so you can basically store whatever you want in here. So in this instance, you must have archived this event, I'm guessing.
No, I haven't. It should actually have in the breakouts, it should have that information. But I'm guessing it's because I did it and not you. So it's local to me, not to you.
Darrel, is that true?
I can't answer that question right now. Having technical difficulties.
Oh, okay.
If you pass that on to me, I can try it in my Graph Explorer. And we can show
Yeah,
it.
let me do that. Let's Skype this. And if you share your screen, Nicola, I'll switch it over to yours. Hide my screen.
Copy that link. Oops. Run query. Access is denied. Oh, because I don't have the permissions.
Oh,
Check that out.
You can demo this new stuff. So in Graph Explorer,
let me
Darrel,
get rid of
you want
this.
to talk about this because you basically came up with this idea.
So the general idea is when you are going and making a request, there are certain permissions that you cannot, or that you can use to authenticate it. And in the past, you had to go to a modify permissions dialog and guess which one, or go find it in the documentation. Using the same idea that we used for generating the snippets, we can go look up in the metadata, and we can figure out which permissions you need for that particular URL. And we show them in the list, in the permissions list there. The important thing is they're actually showed from least to highest privilege. So pick the first one that actually meets your requirements rather than over-granting permissions.
Well, this is interesting. It says data is corrupt.
Nice.
What do we do? Is the app still working? Oh, I'm signed out. Let me sign back into the app. If I moderate, it is picking up because it is loading this. And if I look at the network here, let me refresh this one more time, you'll be able to see, let's see, there's a lot of stuff. Moderator test. So there's the extension, this one. And that's what the breakouts look like for me. So I'm not sure why I can't get it through Graph Explorer, but here it is.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'll troubleshoot that offline. But so this is the extensions are a great way of like storing information directly on entities, or we call them resource objects. What do you call them, Darrel? Resource objects, entities, like the event.
It depends who I'm talking to.
Yeah, that's true. That's why I was trying to say
resources.
No answer.
From a consuming it by an HTTP API, they are resources. From a data modeling and design perspective, they're entities.
Okay. So we're doing this in the code here with the update extension. So we're able to, list those breakouts, all the different meetings, side meeting breakouts directly, and store it on that event object that can be pulled back in the code just by kind of grabbing it here. From grabbing it up here in the get events, wherever that's gone. Sorry, I'm jumping around too much now. And so we can kind of pull that through, which is awesome. So it saves you having your own database, which is really, really nice. And then one last one, which I wanted to show you, was the send message. And so Nicola in the demo showed that he had the ability in his UI to have a message sent to the users. And it's very, very straightforward to do. You basically just call the chat ID for the particular chat that you want to post to, the channel messages, and it's in beta right now, I believe. Did that one go V1? I can't remember. I'd have to check in the docs for that. But it posts the message object through. And one thing that's really nice is when you post that message object, you kind of curate your HTML. And why did you put this in here with the mentions? What does the mentions do, Nicola?
So when we send the message to Teams, the mentions actually adds that @mention for the user. So @Jeremy, @Beth. And then the user gets a notification in their notifications that, hey, somebody mentioned you. So they can go click directly to that comment, to that message, and then join the meeting directly from there.
Yeah, and so that's kind of, it allows you to have that UI that we demoed at the beginning where if I'm in Teams and I'm looking at that chat, I think it was an alert, right? Is that these things come up as like strongly typed objects, so I get those notifications in my feed. So it sent this message, but it allows you to kind of @mention them, which is really cool because it grabs their attention. They'll get the toasts in here and everything, which is really, really cool. So there we go. So we've managed to kind of get that bit going now inside of the code. But what we want to do now is pull in Isabella and say thank you and sayonara to Darrel for jumping on. So thank you,
You're
Darrel.
very welcome.
And
for the minor contributions I made. Enjoy the rest of your show.
We just love you just being on the call.
I know. It's moral
Talk to you
support.
later.
See you, mate.